Hey y'all, Coach Trish Moore here. I'm so excited to share with you our first video on real estate communication. And today we're going to be talking about negotiating your representation of your clients, whether that be buyers or sellers, right? So in Texas, we have the two agreements, the buyer representation agreement, and we have a listing agreement when you're going to take a listing with your sellers. So first, we're going to talk about the buyer representation agreement. This can also be used for tenants here in the state of Texas. So remember, it's the buyer/tenant representation agreement. So it all begins with the information about brokerage services form, which you are to disclose to your clients, any clients, at any substantial real estate conversation. And Edie's got a great video coming at you, all covering that IABS information about brokerage services. So I want to talk to you real quick about that's where you start. So you sit down, you meet with some buyers, and you're about to give your buyer consultation, okay? This is the meeting where you're going to address their questions. You're going to talk about what's on their wish list. You're going to go through the paperwork, and you're going to end with having them sign the paperwork, those buyer documents, including the buyer representation agreement. Now, the information about brokerage services is always the first piece of paperwork I start with when discussing the buyer representation agreement. Why? Because it talks about representation in our state and why Texas is a little different from other states in its representation. So I'll give you an example. We sit down at the table and we are about to sign the paperwork. I've given them a ton of value and information in my buyer consultation. Now it's time to sign the paperwork. So I always start with the information about brokerage services, and I explain this document is a form that we are required to give to you in the state of Texas at any substantial real estate conversation. And what it explains to you is representation in our state. So usually in a transaction, someone, the listing agent, will represent the seller, and buyers also have the option to have a buyer's agent or a selling agent represent them in the transaction. Now, why would this even be important to them? Well, so you do want someone looking out for your best interest throughout the transaction and long after, correct? Absolutely, they do. And really, the cost for the professional fees, we solicit first from the seller or the owner, okay? So a lot of times it doesn't cost you anything to use our services. And we're definitely not just opening doors and showing you homes, although that is part of our job. I am looking after your best interests. I'm fulfilling my duties as your fiduciary. That means anything that you say to me in confidentiality, having to do with finances, your negotiations, how you want to approach the transaction, how you want to make your offer and construct it, that stays with me. I can't be sharing that information with the seller or with the listing agent. So super important to kind of start there for the framework of that. And the easiest way, again, for you to explain the information about brokerage services, Edie covers that in her video, but let's move on. So we're in that appointment. We've gone over the information about brokerage services. Remember, guys, in your buyer consultation, you are asking more questions than you are telling people, okay? That's a huge key. You want to know what's important to them, what's their motivation for purchasing a home. You want to meet them at their needs and exceed their expectations. So you're going to layer everything on. Marketing, your marketing, all about you, the value proposition that you bring to the transaction, the fiduciary responsibility that you have in looking out for their best interests, okay, and trying to find them the very best deal and the perfect home to meet their needs. And then a step-by-step guide is always helpful in that buyer transaction. That really helps, especially first-time home buyers, know what is going to happen next, right? So you are definitely reassuring them, encouraging them that you are their guide. You are their ally through this entire process, okay? So then you get down to the paperwork part. Again, you've layered on the value. You've given the information about brokerage services. Now it's time to talk about that buyer representation agreement. So I always end end my consultation with, what questions do you have for me, right? Before we get to filling out some of these required documents that my broker has. Well, sometimes they may ask, do we pay your commission? Again, that's something that we cover in the buyer representation agreement, but just a quick answer for that at this juncture would be, we always solicit our professional fee from the seller or the listing agent, the owner first, the listing broker first, right? And so usually they will cover that. And so it's at no out-of-pocket cost to you. And you can dive into that a little bit more in the buyer representation agreement. There is a portion in there where they may say, well, what happens if they don't pay it? Great question. And so what I always like to do is negotiate on my behalf, on my broker's behalf. So I will ask that you just let me have that conversation with them. Usually I can get a percentage to cover my broker and my fee. Okay. If it, for some reason, they refuse to pay it, there's ways that we can even add that into part of the loan potentially. And so where it's not out of pocket for you. Okay, so there's ways around it. We don't want to get into the nitty gritty. We just want to say we solicit our commission, our professional fee from the listing agent, from the seller first. Okay, the listing broker. All right, so why representation? They may say, why is it even important, right, for us to be represented? So in this situation, again, I refer back to the information about brokerage services in which someone primarily usually represents the owner, right, the seller, and someone usually represents the buyer. Okay, having that representation means that while we believe all listing agents and brokers will be honest and fair and truthful, at the end of the day, who do they represent? Whose fiduciary responsibility? Where does that lie with them? It lies with the seller or with the owner. And guys, this is the same for builders. Keep this in mind. Who represents the builder? The builder rep. They're lovely people. They're wonderful. We love them. And at the end of the day, they represent the builder's best interest, and you get to represent the buyer's best interest. Okay. And so why representation? Because when you call Mr. Buyer, that sign in the yard, that yard sign, it's going to go to the listing agent, and that person really, although they're sweet and wonderful and fair and kind, they definitely represent the seller, and they're going to negotiate the entire thing in that seller's best interest. Okay. So wouldn't it be great to have someone negotiating on your behalf? Yes. Right. And so you see 100% of my clients, Mr. Buyer, sign this buyer representation because they choose to be represented. They choose to be informed and have an expert like myself guiding and looking out for their best interest. Okay. So that's kind of the rundown on the buyer representation agreement. Let's flip it just a bit into sellers. Okay. And so when you're working with sellers, you're going to be having them sign that listing agreement when it comes down to the paperwork portion. Again, start always with the information about brokerage services because that's really going to tell them how representation works in the state of Texas, okay? And so again, you're going to emphasize, why do you want someone looking out for your best interest? Why would you not, right? You want to show your value before you even get to that listing agreement through your marketing, through your value proposition. Sound familiar? Same thing, the step-by-step process, just like you went through with buyers. So you're going to layer that on all the way before you get to the actual listing paperwork, okay? You pull up the listing agreement when that time comes, only after you've layered that value and you've answered any questions for them, right? And then you're going to go through that listing agreement. Edie also has a video that's going to walk you through how to present that. And when it comes down to negotiating that commission, just remember, some people, not all people, have an issue with the listing commission. They say, we know it's usually 6%. Half of it goes to the selling agent. Half of it goes to the listing broker who is representing us, right? A lot of people, guys, don't automatically assume that the commission is going to be their biggest hang up. Keep in mind this phrase that I always love to have, which is, It's not about how much money I can save you. I want you to hire me to list your house because it's about the money that I can make you. It's about the money that I can put back in your pocket. Let's look at the net sheet with a full listing commission included, right? And that net sheet will be able to show them how they can actually make or net the desired amount that they need and that they want, and possibly even more, while still paying a full commission rate, right? You can show them different areas in that net sheet where they could save money. If they already have a survey, fantastic. We can probably use that, saving you money right there. If there are negotiable items on that net sheet, like the title policy, right? It's a couple grand, that's saving them some money as well. The home warranty, right? A lot of times in this market, the buyers, they could pay for their own. So just reassure them with my strong negotiation skills, there's quite a few areas on this net sheet that are negotiable. Again, I just want to give you kind of the full picture of the traditional seller closing costs that you'll be experiencing. And that's why I have this net sheet here for you. And at the same time, because I am a strong negotiator, I'm going to negotiate several areas of this to put the most money back in your pocket. Okay. So those are just a few things. Again, we're just kind of summarizing here. You learn more as we dive into the coaching courses, and just wanted to give you guys a quick tidbit on negotiating representation. I hope you heard a few things that really helped you in your dialogue and in your conversation with both buyers and sellers. And Edie and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, on the next call, and y'all have a great day.